Meeting to order. Can we have roll call, please, Mayor?
Mrs. Rayo? Here. Mr. Krings?
Here.
Mr. Davis?
Here.
Mr. Bembo?
Here.
Mrs. Lee? Here. Mrs. Medina? Here. Mrs. Heck? Here.
Maureen. Start out with discussion and possible action to approve employee resignations, retirements, and appointments.
This time of year is always a busy time, as you've known from past experience. So we try to get that agenda item on any possible meeting so that we can get people hired in as quickly as possible as they're coming through our interview process. So Ryan will speak to the two we have in front of us.
Yeah, I just handed around a sheet of paper that has the names of two additional new teacher hires that we would recommend approving at the board evening tonight. I actually had more openings than I would have anticipated that we needed to fill this spring and the start of summer, largely due to unexpected resignations, which is the case in both situations here. We had a garden opening at Woodside due to a late resignation, somebody leaving the district for a position elsewhere, and the art opening also due to a resignation/retirement. An individual who's resigning, but it's a retirement for them. They just are not of the requirements to meet the early retirement requirements for the district. So in both cases, we have individuals leaving other positions, and you can imagine that they're very anxious, hoping to be approved so they can get a contract in their hands as they're seeking to resign from current positions. So the recommendation for both of these agencies come in at the entry level salary that we have for the teachers. If there are any questions about either individuals.
I would move the approval of the two professional staff appointments effective August 26, 2014 at the specified salary amounts.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the two professional staff appointments effective August 26, 2014 with the salaries noted. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thanks, Ryan. Next, we can move on to discussion and possible action to amend the 2013-14 district budget.
Did she? Okay. Those are the budget amendments that are being recommended for approval for the 13-14 school year. The reason we do this is in the audit report, they do a comparison of the approved budget to actual, and we made a major change in the budget last board meeting. If you remember, we approved defeasance of long-term debt. That shows up on the fourth line from the bottom. Transfers to other funds, $2,671,803. The rest of these changes were changes that were made primarily for grants throughout the year. When the name ends, grants are amended. That's where most of these changes come from. And that's general fund on the front side, and then on the back side, Fund 21, our revenues were much less than they were the prior year, and so that decreases the revenue. And then you'll see the $2,711,000. That's the defeasance that was approved last board meeting, and then you'll see some other small adjustments, food service and employee benefit transfer.
These are all amendments for last year's budget.
These are for last year's budget, this budget then would go to the auditors by sending it out for their part of their audit.
And they're actually coming Thursday.
They are coming Thursday, this Thursday, and then they'll be back again in August.
Is this the one there?
Yeah, it's very short. It used to be a little bit longer first time. They want to cram it into one day, so that's fine with us. So we're sending a lot of materials ahead of time now. So they have all this material in their hands. In fact, they'll get a copy of this ahead of time, where in the past they used to collect it when they arrived here. Now they're collecting it, it helps speed up the process.
Okay, entertain a motion then to approve the amended district budget 2013-14.
I'll make a motion to approve the proposed amendments to the 2013-14 district budget as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have motion and second to approve the proposed amendments to the 2013-14 district budget as presented. Could we please have roll call, Marie?
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Bembo?
Yes.
Mrs. Head?
Yes.
Mrs. Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Medina?
Yes.
Mr. Krings?
Yes.
Mrs. Rayon?
Yes.
Okay, next we can move on to the discussion and possible action to approve final recommendations concerning the 2014-15 district budget shortfall.
The yellow sheet, I would suggest to you, if you look at the deficit remaining about 2/3 of the way down, I would add to that $28,800 for transportation that was left as a question mark, and I forgot to do that. So the actual deficit that we're looking to meet is $266,953.92. Again, $266,953.92, and it was $28,800 for transportation. So what you'll see is we have some dollars remaining in our printer copier accounts. We have legal fees that are less than we're budgeted for. And the modification I would make for that $28,000 would be that DEU credit number of $94,000. I would change that to $123,036.36. $123,037.36.
That's the, what? I'm sorry. I
The
missed-
DEU credit
Oh, okay.
piece down below where it says
Yeah, got it.
94,000.
Yeah.
So in other words, when you look up above, we have 350,000 budgeted. If we use 123,000 of that, that still allows us $227,000 to cover credits and DEUs. I don't anticipate we will exceed that. Should we, then we would look at our 1.46 CPI under the staff raises number. We won't know for sure. DEUs, last year, I think it was an $86,000 payout. At this point in time, Ryan, I think it was $46,000 right now, but we have still June, July, August. They have until September 1 to turn their things in. So we have some time yet before they'll know that, but I don't think we're going to exceed $227,000. I just really don't think so, but we have to budget as if everyone were taking the full DEU or credit amount. And so that's how I would suggest that we meet the final budget deficit for next year.
What was that deficit number one more time?
$266,953.92. Yep.
And the transportation was 28,000?
28,800.
28,000. Oh, okay. I thought it was,
And we had left it blank initially because we weren't certain
Oh,
Yeah, at the top,
what
yeah,
that
right.
amount would be. Any questions or?
Hearing no questions, then I would make a motion to approve the final budget recommendations as presented to meet the remaining of 2014-15 fiscal year deficit of what's the new number, correct?
Yes.
$266,953.92.
Second.
Okay, we have motion and second to approve the final budget recommendations as presented to meet the remaining 2014-15 fiscal year deficit of $266,953.92. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Next we can move on to,
Make a motion to close the public hearing portion of our budget here.
We haven't presented the budget.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Let us do that first.
Oh, we just did.
No, it's for,
that was for the
Yeah.
deficit.
That's for the deficit.
right.
Okay. Now we can move on
I
to
appreciate your
the
confidence.
public hearing on the 2014-15 proposed district budget.
That's where I
Well,
present.
first you're going to give a presentation here. For all the public hearing.
Everybody, I assume, had a chance to look at it, but we're going to go through it. And if you have any questions as we go along, please feel free to ask. I'm just going to give a brief explanation of what the information is here. And then there was a request for more information, and hopefully we tried to move in that direction. Eventually, I think we want a book like this, double-sided, but maybe not. I don't know. No, it's
Well,
okay.
and a portion of
This
this.
one won an award, and so I was copying from that. But if you don't really want to go there, we'll just, maybe improve this a little bit in the future.
Ain't broke, don't fix it.
I like how you had all the explanations in here. That was very good to refer back to.
Yes.
When I was reading through it, I thought the objectives in the front were very good. That was two things that jumped out at me right away was the
I
explanation.
have to admit, Maureen put together the first 2 pages.
Well, that
There you go.
As usual, thanks, Maureen.
We agreed on the format, and she got all the information together, so I
Well, it's
appreciate
kind
that. Thank you, Maureen. And she put the whole thing together. So I did all the stuff.
Numbers, but.
Compiled it all into one.
But it's so good, and it's such a wealth of
Yes.
information, and the 2 charts it's just, I was super impressed. I think
I
it's
learned how to do
wonderful.
graphs.
I
It was something I wasn't that great at when I started, but
But I mean-
by the time it was done, I was getting
Yeah,
pretty
it was,
proficient.
and it was
No,
understandable.
it's wonderful, I think.
So thank you for your hard work on this, Dan. It was a lot easier to understand.
Yes.
Okay, let's begin. The first 2 pages here give first page actually gives a brief description of the district and its organizational setup, composition, and I notice you'll have to change 2 names now and down the bottom here.
Yes.
After last meeting, or this meeting, or before this meeting. Page 3 is just a listing of our strategic plan, and really it's for the public to reference, or for board members to review.
It's kind of nice to have those objectives just out there, without all the other steps.
Pages 4 and 5 give just a brief description of each of the funds that we use in our district. There are a few funds we don't use, but in general, these are the funds we are using on a regular basis. I believe Fund 72 we no longer are using, and it will be eliminated from the book probably next year, I'm guessing. Take a look. Oh, it'll be here 1 more year, and then it'll be eliminated. Moving on to page, if there's no questions, I'm just going to keep moving along and let's see.
Just interject, maybe that would be the way to do it.
Yep.
If you have questions.
Sure.
Page 6, it's a 5-year summary of all our funds, showing the revenues, expenditures, the difference, and then the beginning and ending fund balance in each fund. So it's just a quick overview. And then Fund 50 and 80 are well, 2/3 of the way down. They're separated from the other funds. It's a auditing setup. It's not how we do our books, but it's the way the auditors do our financial statements. So those 2 funds are separated. They're called proprietary funds. And then what I've done below on the bottom, the last 3 sections, I've taken out the duplicate transactions. In other words, there'll be a transaction in Fund 10 to transfer money to Fund 27. Well, it shows up as revenue in Fund 27 and expense in Fund 10. It sort of inflates our numbers. So I've listed those items there and then taken them out of the total. So when you see the total on the bottom, it's unduplicated numbers. Any questions on that? Page 7 is just a graphic depiction of our expenditures. And then I've sort of shown the different funds by different colors. Some of them you can see easier than others. Obviously, the larger one is the general fund. It just gives you an idea of the size of the funds compared to each other. It's over the last 3 years. You notice the top amount in 2013, 12-13, we actually defeased a significant amount of debt, not defeased, refinanced debt that year. The amount was $5.65 million, and that's why there's quite a bit larger dollar amount of transactions that 1 year. And then page 8, what this does is a comparison of our revenue and our expense by fund. And it's just a graphic depiction of what we expect our budget to be next year, and the percentage of the total budget that it represents. The general fund in revenues will represent about 76.78% of our total budget, and in expenditures it represent about 77.13% of our total expenditure budget. And then the next largest area is special education. Page 9 is the budget that actually was published in the newspaper prior to this meeting, establishing some of the numbers did change from what was published here to what we actually ended up in the book in that 2-week period. There were some changes made. But in general, it represents what we're presenting here tonight, and it also notes the time of the meeting. The one thing you'll note is that funds 60 and 70 are not published here. There was a decision that GASB does not include those as a fund that the board needs to take action on. Those are proprietary funds and fiduciary funds, excuse me. Fiduciary funds, and the board doesn't need to take action on those funds. Moving on to page 10, we have a more detailed explanation of the general fund, and it's the only fund that I've put in here in detail, maybe I'll look at some of the other funds in the future. We just ran out of time to make this budget book together, but once we have the format, I think we can probably add some other funds to this in the future. But this represents, like I said, about 80% of your total budget. And starting on page 10, we have a summary of our revenues by source.
So Dan, the revenue from other school districts, that's the 6603 stuff?
Yes, that's correct.
That's where that comes in?
Right.
It'd be part-time open as well.
The 99% of that is the open enrollment, not open enrollment,
What would be both of those?
It could be both probably, well, but that's
Yes.
also where 6603 comes from.
That's correct. Open enrollment and the 6603 agreement, students that come.
Okay.
And then the graphic depiction of the sources. And then we get into a little more detail on the sources following that. We take each of the major sources and then split into specific details. Let's see, one that may stand out. You see the stage revenue right in the middle of the page. That's a rather significant source of grant money for the district.
We're hoping Luther also just leaves that alone.
As long as the state continues to fund that, that's a significant source of revenue right now. Of course, it also equates into a significant expense by the district, but there's revenue to offset most of that. Our largest source of revenue is the equalization aid. It comes directly from the state. It's right in the center of the page. We're projecting $31,857,702 for next year. That's subject to change. Last year, it changed late in the summer, and although I don't anticipate that this year, it could happen. Not as likely as it was last year, but because of the biennial budget. The next largest source of revenue is the first line, property tax. And you'll see the details of the other sources.
Dan, when it comes to other state categorical aid, what is the 771,300? What would that be? It's right above.
Other state categorical aid. That's a new funding source. The state approved a per pupil an amount. Rather than putting it into the equalization aid, they created a new category, and that's what that represents.
Was that bump that was
Yeah.
by Luther Olson?
I'm
Is that-
not sure the legislature
Is that the one that?
proposed it, but
That may have been what came late last year. This is the $75 increase, and then it was another 75 this year.
right, it came late last year, and then they're also, right, and it's doubled for this year. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's correct, that's what it is. We also get some, in that area, we also get some, of course, that's not from the state, though, that's from the federal government.
That may have been the
We get some-
Luther Olson that he was talking about it or pushing for that. But I don't know if that's, I don't know who that ended up coming from for sure. I mean, it's not from Luther, but I mean that he was pushing that there would be an increase in the town.
This is the increase that he was
I
pretty sure.
believe so.
Right,
Okay.
it's new revenue, it's a new source of revenue. In some respects, I wish they would have, there's a reason they didn't put it in the categorical, in the equalization aid, because I think they were trying to target certain districts. When it goes into equalization aid, districts with a low property value, such as our district, get a larger portion of the revenue. When they target it per pupil, they can spread it out equally to all districts. So that was the reason, and there was a reason, political reason for them to do that, to get support for it.
Okay.
Any others? Okay, moving on to the expenditures on page 12. The expenditures are broken down two different ways. The first way they're broken down is by object. That's the type of expense it is. In other words, whether it's a salary or benefit, a purchase service, a capital purchase, non-capital would be supplies, insurance, debt retirement, and then just other objects is just dues and fees. You'll see that salaries and employee benefits represent over 70% of our total general fund budget. When you combine that with the salary and benefits with the transfer of other funds, did I list it here? Yeah, it represents 82.4%. Salary and benefits represent 82.4% of our total budget, which is higher than some other districts. We do spend more in that area than some other districts. And one of the reasons is because we do have SAGE. That does increase the number of staff. Then we have it broken down into more detail in each of the areas. You see the employee benefits on the bottom of the page are broken into different areas. You'll see that the largest area is health insurance. It exceeds the retirement, WRPS. And we expect that area to grow more rapidly than any of the other areas. The other areas are based on the increase in salaries, where health insurance is based on the market. You'll see more detail. Let's see here. People transportation is probably our third largest area, single area of cost to the district. First being salaries, then health insurance. Well, retirement comes in there, and then transportation. I guess would be the fourth largest single area of cost for the district. We don't transport as many students as some districts. Some smaller districts, transport all their students. I think DC Everest, any student could ride a bus. Where that's the one extreme, and then we have us where we transport anyone over 2 miles, or that's in a hazardous area. To Marshfield, which is the other extreme, where they only transport anyone who does not live in the city. So looking at the amount we spend on transportation, that's an area where Marshfield does not have that expense that we do. Any questions on that detail? On page 14 at the top, we show a transfer to other funds. Obviously, the largest area is special education, and that's required to be reported in a separate fund. And what goes into that fund are all special education expenditures, and the revenue there is special education revenue, categorical aid from the state, followed by the federal special education aid grant money for flow-through. And then there's a little bit for early childhood. The bulk of the special education fund comes from the district. In the middle of the page, I show a different breakdown. I break this down now by the function, or what the budget is used for. So it's broken down by instruction, support services, and then non-program transactions. And you'll see $30 million is budgeted for instruction next year, $20 million for support services, and then $8 million is basically then transferred to the special education fund. And then we show the detail on page 15, and that wraps up the breakdown on our general fund budget. You'll see the undifferentiated curriculum and the regular curriculum. Undifferentiated is the elementary grades, and the regular curriculum is the junior high. We do spend more in the upper grades. We have more subject areas and more expense. All of the co-curricular activities are in a separate function, but you see that, and then we have physical curriculum, which is your physical education programs, and driver's ed, and let's see what else is in there. I think that's about it. Under sports services, you'll see there's pupil services, instructional staff services, which includes the library, your librarians, and guidance counselors, psychologists, what do they call them? There's a group that social workers. Social workers, thank you, are in that group. General administration is basically the central office. School building administration, And then business administration includes the building and grounds. It includes the business office, the building grounds, the maintenance, and transportation. So that's why, because it includes
It's not a bad
transportation.
salary.
Because it includes transportation, that's why it's the amount it is. It doesn't all go to the business office. Central services, we have our technology in that area, and our postage, and our just services that serve the entire district.
Copiers.
Copy machines are in that area also. Insurance and judgments is what it is. It's the board insurance, general property insurance, your liability insurance, your board errors and omission insurance. It's nothing for the employees, it's just for the school district. Debt service is not the amount you're paying for the short-term borrowing. What that is most of that is a transfer to cover the interest payments in Fund 38. That's interest on that debt that refinanced the employee benefits that were the retirement system, not the unfunded pension. So the bulk of that is the interest to cover that debt. A significant amount of that debt was refinanced, was paid off last meeting. Any questions? Or am I going to sleep?
No?
Okay, the next page, the next 3 pages are the budget that you have to adopt, if you choose to adopt the budget. And it's just a summary of everything you looked at here in the format that TPI recommends for budget adoption. And I'm not going to go through it because we've already looked at these numbers in detail. So when and if you make a motion to approve the budget, this is the document that would be approved. Moving on to page 19, just a summary of our debt. I'm sorry, not a summary of our debt. It represents what our legal debt limit is, okay? And then what our current indebtedness is. So we're at 5.4% of the legal limit in our current debt, which is good.
Really?
We've paid off a significant portion. It's less than half of what it was 3 years ago. So that's impressive, what the board has been able to do. You'll see a summary there. I've listed the debt that's been paid off or defeased in the last 3 years, including the amount that was just defeased last week. So you'll see that $12,325,000 of debt has been paid off, representing about $600,000 in interest savings, current and future. Just actually a better return than you could get if you invested the money. I guess that's what.
I was just going to suggest that the word defease is defined in the back.
I noticed that.
Just want to make sure.
Oh, I did add that in the back.
Yes.
Thank you, Dan.
Page 20 is a depiction of our current debt as it exists currently. What I don't have on here is we've already sent the money to pay off that one we just approved last board meeting. That money has been wired out today, and the transaction to close on that actually occurs tomorrow. I didn't list that here, so I show that as actually being paid off. What this represents is the current debt as it'll exist after tomorrow when that transaction closes. And you'll see in Fund 38 you do not have a principal payment on that debt until 2019. What that means is, in theory, you do not have to levy anything in the general fund to cover any of that debt payment for 5 more years. And in that amount of time, I think it'd be a good idea to try to pay off some more of that if you have funds available. And then you'll never have to budget for that debt ever. It'll be completely eliminated. At least that's an idea I have in my mind, that to try to budget $1 million in 1 year, increasing your general fund budget is a significant amount. And so that's something that's pushed off for 5 years. The interest rate is relatively low. It was refinanced, so it's refinanced at the current rates, which is a low rate. And hopefully in the next 5 years, we can pay off some more of that. Fund on the right-hand side on the top is a combination of Fund 38 and Fund 39. On the bottom is a depiction of Fund 39 debt. There's only 2 debt issues remaining. There's the one from 2006 facility referendum. Actually, both of these are from 2006. One was the regular referendum for facility infrastructure needs, and the other was a QZAB that was run through the referendum, put it into Fund 39. Those funds have a escrow agreement, and so we're putting, let's see, $200,000 a year into a sinking fund. And in 2022, when it was set up, the sinking fund was set up, it was assumed that our interest rates would be higher than they currently are. There would have been $2,820,000 to pay off that debt. That's why it shows no principal and no interest. There is no interest on the debt. We do have a sinking fund set up, and but because of the low interest rates, we're not going to reach $2 million. There will be a small amount that you'll have to levy to make that final payment in 2022. It might be $100,000, $200,000. I mean, that's a significant amount of money, but it's minor compared to the total amount of debt. That's what I'm saying. You do not have to levy anything for that $2.8 million. That's being defeased each year. That amount, there's an amount being set aside each year to make that payment. That's why it's showing 0 and 0. I think there's about $600,000 to $700,000 already set aside for that bond payment in Fund 39. Any questions on that? The Fund 2021 is a depiction of our property value, equal valuation of each of the municipalities that make up the school district. The largest municipality, obviously, is the city. They represent 47.3% of our total valuation of the district. The next largest is Grand Rapids at 22%. And then there's a 4-year history there of valuation, and you can see how valuations have changed. The city actually has increased in value at a more rapid rate than the rest of the district, and so their percentage of our total value has increased slightly by about just about 3/4%. And then on the bottom is the depiction of the evaluation as we projected in 2014-15. Now that's an estimate. That was the spring estimate. It'll be the final evaluation coming out in the fall, so this could change a little bit. Page 22 is two graphs. One is our tax levy history. And you'll see the tax levy history has been relatively flat. It's been growing since the low of since 1996. And you'll see it's increasing slightly every year. And then on the bottom is a graph of our tax rate. It dropped significantly, precipitously from 92 to 1996. And that's when the state picked up 2/3 funding. And then it stayed relatively flat from a low in, let's see, low in 97 and a high in 98. We're just under that amount currently. Page 22 is a 4-year history of our buildings. I don't have a projection for next year. I just went with the enrollment figures I had. And the last 4 years, that's what our enrollments have been in each of the buildings. I've grouped the virtual school enrollment on the bottom, and then I have it graphed out showing the relative size of each of the buildings and their enrollments. Page 24, I showed student trends using two different numbers. The top graph is a head count. In other words, bodies in our building. How many students actually are in our buildings, and it does include the virtual students that are enrolled in our district. We have been declining precipitously, and that has added to our budget challenges. You see a slight up spike in enrollment in 2004-05. Anyone remember what that was?
4K?
4K? We had 4K. That helped for 3 years, and then we just kept sliding down. The good news is I believe our enrollment should increase. I'm saying we're going to increase by 5 students next year, which is better than it's been in the last 20 years. So I don't know. I don't know whether my projection will hold true, but
There haven't been any wagers made or anything.
we haven't put any money on it. But I'm saying we're going to increase by 5 students. So hopefully this downward trend will start to level out. What's more devastating is the bottom graph, because that's even steeper than the bodies in buildings, because the bodies that they count for state aid has dropped even more rapidly. And
So just for an example, the reason that number is different is that if you count a 4K student, you only get a 0.6.
0.6, right.
FTE, it's not a full FTE, so it's not the same as, it's like a 0.6 body versus up here you
They count,
full,
we
the
count
actual
everybody
head
in our
count.
building, but for state aid purposes of membership count.
It's how they,
Why do they count at 0.6?
because that's the funding you get. It's a half day.
And they're not in our building all day. We provide,
So the top one is the actual head count, the bottom is how they fund it.
So if we have a student who's, for example, a special needs student and they only come to school for half a day, do we get however much they're in school, or is it the head count for them?
yes, we get them for however much they're in school. The only students that can be in school for half a day are kindergarten students, and that's by parent
No, but
choice.
there are some special needs students who don't.
Oh, those students, if that's their IEP, we
Right.
still get to count them as a full student.
Full student.
If they're there by IEP because of IEP reasons, they count as a full student. In other words, they can't handle all day.
Right.
So they have other placement for the other part of the day. Yes, they still count as a full student. I'll leave it at that. And that's it. This is our last page, page 25. This represents our personnel allocation. On the top, it lists my building, and I've broken the staffing each building into 3 categories: the administration, certified staff, and the support staff. The last item there is district-wide. In that district-wide, it would include central office as well as building grounds and food service. Now, the food service that are in buildings, the food service director and secretary would be included on the district-wide. The actual food service in the building would be included in the buildings. And then the support staff and the total staff by building. And then the graph is shows the comparison of the administration to the certified staff to the support staff. Gives you a relative comparison of the number of FTE we have. This is an FTE equivalent. It's not a body count. It's an FTE equivalent. And then the last, I don't know how many pages we got here, is a glossary of terms. And on page 30, there's a definition of disease. I'm just. Any questions on it? Yes.
I don't know who would answer this, you or Ryan, but in benefits and salary changes this past year and next year, how do our employees stack up? Do they lose money? Do they gain a little? There are different categories, but generally, how does that fall out?
Every public employee has lost money since Act 10 started.
I think they're continuing to lose money when you look at the increase in our
Insurance
costs.
Or keeping it even.
Yeah,
But
they're not
Social
gaining.
Security goes up, they're paying more, you know what I mean? So it just, some things we don't control, or if the WRS goes up, we're losing more.
The WRS contribution requirements that go up in January, and as far as the insurance goes, if we were talking about a teacher, for example, that has a family plan and the group health right now, in the next year, I would say they're running the potential of having about $1,000 more out-of-pocket costs. When you talk about the increase in premium, the fact that the deductible is going up, and it's going to go up twice on them in the next year, effective July 1, and again, it starts over again on January 1. So that approximately is about $1,000 more out of pocket that they're going to be incurring in the next year. The teacher, for example, in a family plan, and the increase they had for this past year was just under $500 a piece. So I think you're on average talking about $500 reduction when you start adding up all of the costs, and that's even before looking at what their WRS contribution may be as far as the change coming up.
Why is there an increase in January?
I don't think we know for next January. This last January, it increased.
Okay. That's okay.
And they're working just as hard.
They're working
I
harder.
think you'd argue harder.
They're working harder.
Doesn't sound
Definitely
fair.
say they're working harder.
I think staff members are being asked to do more.
Dan, what year was it when the state finally got their act together to let us know what we were going to get for aid? And it was so late in the year that it became a property tax credit? instead of the school district getting it?
Quite a while ago, yes.
And I mean, that's still happening today.
That's still happening. That doesn't represent any of the
Right.
revenue that affects the district. What it does is it shows up in your property tax bill as a credit.
Mhm.
And
And before that, it would have been money coming directly to the school district, but instead the homeowners are getting a break
correct, it's
every
a
year.
credit to homeowners, property owners, I should say. Anything else?
Can I make one?
Well, we totally said.
Okay, so now we're in the public hearing on the proposed district budget.
Do we need a motion?
Earlier.
Do you-
Okay, I'd make a motion to close the public hearing portion of the budget hearing.
Second.
Okay, we have motion and second to close the public hearing portion of this budget hearing. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we can move on to action on the 2014-15 proposed budget, including action to approve a resolution to commit 2014-15 district fund balance, which was our attachment A.
I'll make a comment on the resolution on the fund balance. There are still funds that are being used by curriculum and technology from the 2006 referendum. They've been very, what's a good word?
Frugal.
Frugal. I was going to say frugal, but I was trying to think of a more.
Forward thinking.
Forward thinking, yes, okay.
Progressive.
Either one works fine. They've been using it sparingly and where needed, and they have quite a bit that they haven't used from those referendums, from that referendum, and that represents that. I'm designating that amount out of fund balance for those two areas, and then any excess towards the open. That's the recommendation.
Any discussion?
Explain that again to me about the OPEB contribution. I understand the two areas from the referendum.
We have an OPEB fund that we use, and we have to deposit money into the fund, and the more money we have in the fund, the lower the amount required to be deposited each year. So the district can set aside money in that fund to decrease its future contributions and offset future expense for the district. If we don't have a purpose for the money in the general fund, it shows up as uncommitted money. And in theory, someone could say, well, why do you need that money to fund balance? That's the reason I recommend designating it. And since you do have an ongoing obligation for those retirement benefits, I'm recommending that you use or designate your general fund for that purpose. Next year, I think I might have a different designation, or recommendation for designation, depending on what the facility committee report is for the board.
Well, they could change the designation anyway.
Yes, you could change it. Yeah,
You could-
it's
you
done
could go this-
annually.
you could go this direction tonight, and then
Yeah,
maybe
in a
decide
minimum, it's
to
done annually.
change that.
If you wanted to change it 4 months from now,
Oh, okay, we're not locked in.
no.
But we want to designate it for something so that,
I get
It
it.
So that
shows
they
up as
don't take
committed,
it.
you have it in your fund
Yes.
The bottom line
balance.
is if you don't use it, they take it.
So if we blow a furnace or something, we could,
Yes, you can come back and say, no, we need to take some.
okay, I get it.
Okay.
Plus we get interest on that fund too.
Yes, the money, it's very low, but, I mean, yes, we do get some interest. A lot less than in Fund 73, but we don't have the diversity of investments available in the general.
Oh, that's true. Any further questions? If not, I'll make a motion to approve the proposed 2014-15 district budget, including a resolution to commit to any remaining 2014-15 district fund balance to fund curriculum and technology over and above the 2014-15 budgeted amounts, and secondly, the district's OPEB liability.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second to approve the proposed 2014-15 district budget, including a resolution to commit any remaining 2014-15 district fund balance to fund curriculum and technology over and above 2014-15 budgeted amounts, and secondly, the district's OPEB liability. Maureen, could we please have a roll call vote?
Mrs. Rayo?
Yes.
Mrs. Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Head?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Medina?
Yes.
Mr. Krings?
Yes.
Mr. Bembo?
Yes.
Next, we'll move on to the presentation and approval of the recommended tax levy.
You didn't have a sheet on the
No.
No.
Oh,
You read
this.
It's the one that's in the system.
It's on there, yeah.
Oh, no, that's not a separate
It's
sheet.
in the book.
It's in the book.
Yeah.
Did you look on page 9?
Yeah.
The bottom right-hand corner.
Page nine.
Bottom of page 9.
Bottom page 9. 22,170,691.
1%.
Which represents
1%.
1% increase in the total levy. Depending on the valuation, it could drop the mill rate at this time.
Well, and we've met like this before and then had to meet again in fall.
You'll redo this in the fall
We
because
may have to, we may not.
they'll certify our state aid in the 15th of October, and then they'll also, in October, they'll give us a new fall evaluation for the municipality, the school districts, and then based on that, you'll be redoing. And then the revenue limit will come into effect at that point. It'll cap our levy, so you'll be redoing this. This is just a projection on my part on what our revenue limit will allow at this point.
That very simple formula the state gives you.
That's right.
I didn't put it in the book this year. Maybe I should have.
No, I guess.
It's the usual formula sheet that you've seen before, but it's presented here just a little differently.
I would move to approve the 2014-15 tax levy in the amount of $22,170,691.
Second.
Okay, we have motion and second to approve the 2014-15 tax levy in the amount of $22,170,691. Maureen, could we have roll call vote, please?
Mr. Bembo?
Yes.
Mrs. Medina?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Krings?
Yes.
Mrs. Head?
Yes.
Mrs. Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Rayo?
Yes.
Thank you, Maureen. And last, we have presentation of the district other post-employment benefits report.
Yes, GPI, if we have a other post-employment benefit fund, one of the DPI requirements is that we present some information on the amount in the trust, the returns on our investments, and the total disbursements at our budget hearing. So we are doing that. And I believe you have a sheet in front of you that shows the trust fund balance as of the end of May of $1,021,160. For the last 12 months, since the end of May, we've had a return of 9%, or about $85,000 of earnings. And then our disbursements were made in June of last year, $2,867,233. And then I'm projecting our contributions this June will be $2,839,400 from the district and $154,000 from employees for a total of $2,993,796 of contributions into that fund. And that ends my presentation on the OPEB trust fund.
Thanks, Dan, and thanks for your hard work on this and putting that booklet together. It was a lot easier to read this year, so appreciate that. And with that, we're adjourned.
Yes, people want this.